I'm happy to be here sharing about my work through Studio Lani and sort of walking you through my journey and how I, believe design is a powerful tool. And for me, how I, try to use it as a mediation tool to sort of merge different worlds. As someone who has basically sort of experienced in an interesting way the concept of duality in my life, and in different ways, I've seen sort of that concept of duality sort of being a part of different aspects of my life. So to say, I'm Nigerian and Canadian, and I've also sort of switched careers. I went from the corporate world to design world, and so very sort of highly structured and sort of in industry that was a lot more predictable to a more sort of organic, free-flowing industry. And in general, in terms of my interest, I'm someone who is, quite passionate about, preserving culture and tradition and handmade sort of, techniques and so forth. But at the same time, I'm also someone who's inspired by innovation and what the future looks like, and, letting my imagination wander. So this sort of, like I said, duality of this sort of different, seemingly different things, is something that sort of it interests me, and has somehow been sort of like the area that I sort of creatively pull from. Um, and so I've been doing Studio Lani, focusing mostly on lighting and sort of small furniture items, a lot of sort of limited collection pieces because it's handmade. It's quite intricate to make, and I work with different artisans. It's a very hands-on process. It's a very iterative process. A lot of sort of prototyping, very experimental in nature, and it's a lot of it is about sort of sort of fusing arts, craft, and design, and sort of trying to find synergy between the sort of different uh, worlds, so to say. Um, so before I get into the presentation, I want to share a little bit about how I sort of found my way into design professionally. So I actually, basically, like I said, I was working in the corporate world, and so I just realized I didn't put my timer on. So I was going to put it on just so that I make sure that I put a little bit. But yeah, so I was working in the corporate world, and I was always someone that gravitated towards the creative field. I was always that child that took art class very seriously, and I always saw myself long term in the creative field. Being, I guess, immigrating to Canada, I was sort of encouraged to obviously do something that they thought would I would get a job right away, and that's kind of how I found myself, going to a little more sort of traditional work corporate, and found myself in consulting and just sort of doing what was expected in that way. And also, to be honest, I didn't really know what I would do in the creative world. I didn't have that courage at that point. And so I did what I felt was predictable and what I was, let's call it highly encouraged to do. But anyway, so while I was in consulting, it was interesting because at that particular point, within a short period of time, I was exposed to a lot of different interiors, a lot of different offices. I don't know if you guys are familiar with how consulting works. Basically, you go to different client sites, you kind of help them to solve different problems, to just make your company more efficient. So essentially, you're working at different client sites, and within a short period of time, you're working at different client sites, exposed to different hospitality environments. And I started to realize the connection people have, um, in a very sort of heightened way, the way we respond to spaces, the psychology between us humans and spaces. And that was really interesting to me. Also, this was around the time when a lot of the cool, Google campus style offices started popping up. So when I first started the company, everything was quite black and white and monotone, and navy blue was like, whoa, the color. And I think about 6 months into the 6 months, after about 6 to 8 months after working there, all of a sudden, they had this, interior design company come, and they, set up their mood board and all these different things, and talking about how they're going to transform the office and the layout, and make everything open plan, and they want to create foster more community, and how they were going to, just use design to sort of really help the company achieve its the new culture which they wanted a more sort of inclusive, more open, more approachable. And so for me, that was the first time I got to see design in a professional setting. You know, I had always, you know, been interested in design. I grew up drawing. I thought I would do fashion, to be honest, because that was the first form of design I knew. You know, for a lot of, probably like a lot of folks, you know, I wasn't exposed to furniture design. I didn't know it was a thing, you know. Um, and even though I had done my own apartment, you know, and you know, helped friends and all that stuff, and I actually didn't realize that I was making furniture. I made a coffee table, but again, I wasn't taking it seriously. People liked it, but you know, but I wasn't. I didn't think it was something that could really become a career, to be honest. So when I saw what this company was doing and what their plans and how the company I was working at really brought them in, and there was a connection between what they were going to do with the aesthetics and also how they're going to make the space function to, you know, create this new culture that they wanted to have to meet the business objectives. That was like super interesting to me. And I think it sort of just planted something in my head in terms of just this awareness to that the value of interior design in that particular way. So that was the starting point. So then I started doing more research, going to more design shows, and then I started to sort of expand, and that's how my understanding expanded into just the other offerings and other values, and little by little starting to, you know, subscribing to all the design magazines I could, and started to better basically understand just design from a more industry and more sort of academic perspective, as opposed to just what I thought it was, you know. And that's how I basically, you know, applied to Parsons and went and studied interiors over there. Now, while I was at Parsons, even though it was interiors, I was starting to get into furniture, and as I was getting into furniture, I realized, which is towards the end, so I did not study furniture, but I was, you know, they would say make one furniture thing for your interior project, and I would do like 10. And I'm like, I can't help it. I don't know what's going on. I like, which one should I pick? And, you know, I had some pretty cool professors, like Professor Hayes, who encouraged me. She's like, I think you should just use them. It seems like just use them. I was like, oh, okay, cool. She's like, I think you got to pay attention to what's happening here. And so that was pretty interesting. And then it just one thing after another, I started just kind of just working on sketches a lot and doing a lot of sketches. And then a friend actually told me about a sort of like a charity auction thing. And it was supposed to be sort of this, how do I call it? Almost sort of like it was like a fun project thing. It was fun, but I took it very seriously and spent the little money I had and just put all my effort into it. And it got selected to participate, to be a part of a group exhibition in ICFF, International Contemporary Furniture Fair. And so, you know, it shows up at ICFF, and I guess, you know, like I said, I put so much energy into it, and I really I was like, this is this is the opportunity to really like try to see what this could be. And it presented, people were actually coming up to me and asking, so like, where's the rest of your other stuff? You know, like, and I was like, oh wow, they think there's other stuff. Like that's really interesting, you know. So like I should be like, you know, like some of the sketches that I've been doing for all these years, I should really try to figure out how to put it to life. Obviously, it was, you know, student budgets and all that stuff. There's limitations in terms of what you can actually do and what you can produce. So I started with candle holders. And so now I'm going to get into the presentation, and you're going to see, hopefully, how the different dots connect. So kind of talked a little bit about some of this, you know, how I'm interested in like things from the past, like nostalgia inspired me, but you know, I'm also trying to be quite present and things in the future, and tradition, innovation, handmade, machine made, and just the idea of like thinking local and global, that local culture, that local community sort of mindset. I think more than ever, I think in this pandemic, we've all learned how connected we are, and we can't just think in our own little silos. So as a designer, I try my best to kind of think of these different things. Okay, so I'm going to focus on tradition and innovation because that's been a huge part of the product design and furniture design aspect for me, and using design as a mediation tool in that regards. So growing up in Nigeria, I left Nigeria when I was around 10 years old and moved to, immigrated to Canada with my family. And in Nigeria, Nigeria is quite, it's very festive, very vibrant culture. And so growing up, we had a lot of events, and I mean, when you give birth, we have a naming ceremony where everybody comes so they hear what the names of the many names of the child is. And so I grew up going to a lot of different family events, and music was a big part of it. And musical instruments were a big part of it. And there's this musical instrument called the talking drum. And so this is a picture of a talking drum right here. And it was just, when I moved to Canada, my family, I actually had like a talking drum with me that my grandma gave me in Nigeria. And I started to just kind of take this talking drum around with me. And this talking drum just always just reminded me of, good childhood memories, of joyful experiences with family members and loved ones. And so there was an emotional connection to the talking drum, because now I was removed from the setting. I didn't know how to play the instrument, but it just seeing it visually just reminded me, just made me feel happy. And I think just for me, the objects around us, there is a strong emotional connection that we have as humans in general. It makes us feel a certain way. It enhances our mood and all these different things. So at first it was an emotional connection. It reminded me of, like I said, so many good things. But then as I sort of started digging a little deeper, I actually started doing a lot more research about this instrument. And, I realized that it's actually an instrument that basically back in the days, they would beat the drum in one community so that they would send a message across the next community. So if there was, whatever, it's like something people needed to be cautious of something, to be, to flee or whatever, they would do that. If people needed to come together to celebrate, they would do that. So it's basically one of the few musical instruments that actually mimics the human intonation, which is why it's called a talking drum, because it actually talks. So back in the days, I really believe it was the first communication tools. Like think of like an ancient cell phone or something like that. It did what a cell phone was, and there were people that actually knew how to did it, and people that understood, and they would sort of share the message. So that was also something that was interesting to me. Now, aesthetically, I found it quite interesting as a source of inspiration because, like I said, if you look at the drum, this is the drum, right? It has sort of this layered thing about it. There's this sort of leather cords that surround it, and then there's sort of like this. There is a wooden sort of hourglass interior, and there's like other materials on the top and bottom, and this sort of like aesthetic has really sort of inspired me. So it first was, quite literal when I first did the talking light, where it's like, the leather cords are like straight metal lines. So that was the first thing. The leather cords became metal lines, and that's actually how I got into metal. And then the wooden thing was sort of echoed with the talking lights. Now, as I got more and more into different collections, so this is a talking table, right? As I got more and more into different collections, the talking light and talking drum actually started to evolve and morph into different shapes, right? But this really was the sort of, I would say, it really sort of created the visual DNA of collections to come. So like I said, this is a talking table. It's actually a multifunctional piece. It's got a lighting component, and it also has a tray top. This piece was actually part of the Wanted Design exhibition Launchpad, and it ended up winning the American section, so that was pretty cool. It was a big moment in terms of just encouraging me, sort of just increasing confidence in some ways. Um, this is a this is also an early collection. It was a conceptual piece. It was it's, it's a conceptual chair. This is just kind of show a bit of process, and especially earlier on, I did a lot of I still do a lot of sort of miniature metal sculptures, a lot of sketching. With this particular piece, it was really just kind of like free form. I wanted to sort of push and challenge myself to create a piece where it's sort of like never ending. It's one continuous thing where the leg evolves to the back, and it's sort of like just one continuous, like seamless rhythm. And it was a fun piece, challenging, but it was a fun piece. So yeah, so this is the page I wanted to sort of highlight more about the talking drum sort of aesthetics, and how the metal lines have morphed into different organic forms in other collections. These are the floor lamps. These are floor lamps. This is called Sissy Echo floor lamps. Sissy Echo basically means latest lady. It's a term over here. And it was really about for the floor lamps, they were larger pieces, and I really wanted to sort of really explore just how metal can be so malleable. I think metal is such a beautiful material because it's quite strong, but it's even quite flexible, and we're able to achieve different forms through that. This is the CC Eco pendant light. So that's the floor lamp version here. This is the pendant light version here. It's really a piece that I think it celebrates sort of, let's say, feminine strength and feminine aura. And there's also a certain how do I explain this? It's just a huge sculptural component to it. Even though it's a metal piece, a lot of times I'm inspired by, even things I see in the market. A lot of times it's wooden sculptures, but usually have a bit more of these types of forms. But I like to kind of, just try to do things in a different way, and sort of try to push the boundaries and so forth. This is a snapshot just to kind of show the different product categories that we do. Like I said, we're quite experimental. I get bored quite easily. So I also am always kind of open-minded and trying to test different things. Yeah, so some of them are limited edition based on how intricate they are and how difficult it is to produce it. Because I work a lot with artists and craftsmen. This is a wooden piece. It's for the Ibako wooden light. It was created by a wood carver. It's actually inspired by a food utensil called a vaka, which is basically used to scoop, what we call solid food, which is basically like, it's like mashed potato, but like with different kinds of ground grains, like fufu, inyo, eba, that's like the kind of names and stuff. And so I like the fact that the food utensil, the vaka, is a very simple form. It's just literally just a sort of a swoop, and that literally created the character of this. I wanted something that felt simple, but at the same time a little complex, and so adding texture and detail to sort of highlight the light in here was important. So I don't do a lot of stuff in wood. This is one of the few pieces that I've done in wood. And this is a bit of a process to see some of the guys who I worked with, who are just really talented. These guys, they come from wood carving sort of lineage, Typically what they do is they have sort of specific things that they carve, often, like more like sort of little art objects, and some bigger objects depending on the person. So this is the first time, I guess, them working in this product category, which is lighting. So it was an interesting, process. It's always exciting and iterative process, and there are challenges sometimes because you gotta sort of sometimes when working with artisans and sometimes they're used to doing things a certain way. It takes time. It's like anything. You build trust in each other that we're going somewhere, and we might not get it right the first or the second time, but we're gonna keep trying. So we didn't get it right the first or second time. So we do a few prototypes and stuff, but it's part of the process. It's part of the journey. And when we get it right, it's so exciting and it's so gratifying for everybody, because we sometimes, we're going somewhere where we don't know what the destination is going to look like because it's an experimental approach, you know. Um, this is, I do a lot of sketching. It's such a big part of my process. I probably sketch like every other day or whenever I can, to be honest. Not a lot of things that I sketch make it out in real life, but they're somewhere. And sometimes they come back, a couple of years later. And sometimes it's like, no, it's like you just find the right time and it makes sense cost-wise and everything. I thought I'd share a little bit of like a process video to show you this particular sketches, and it's actually a recent piece we're working on. So the video actually starts and then it turns. That's my very cool assistant, David. He's new. With COVID, we're kind of in transition with our studio. And our studio is so small, so we kind of just working outside sometimes, depending on like if we need to just lay things out. So it's not the most glamorous, but it's we get it done and we do what we need to do. Basically, me sort of getting a pattern for this new collection. A lot of back and forth, trying to figure out the right shapes and the right proportions, um, and then how it all works together. So is it making sense individually, and how does it all come together? So I'm just trying to lay it out, with it all together, come back to it. This is like a new one where we're trying to just mix metal and the mats. So this is like an example of a sample piece. So we did a sample piece first, but we did it all the way. And then we started playing around with different shapes and so forth. So all this, obviously not painted yet, and they don't have the colors and stuff. That just kind of shows you like the before and after. Like I said, I work with a lot of different artisans. It's a male-dominated industry, so it can be an interesting experience, especially working in the informal sector. But yeah, it's quite interesting. There's so much talent. I don't typically actually work with people that do furniture. So for example, this folks actually usually make gates and so forth, and then I sort of they have the mental skills, and we work together to figure out how to work to do furniture or artists and so forth. Because the things that I gravitate towards don't necessarily always follow the typical traditional furniture making process. This is a specific piece we did for someone. It was sort of like a new sort of area for us. It was a wall piece, so I did this a few sketches to basically share with them. It was really about creating a piece that was futuristic, to to pay homage to what the values of what that company was trying to do, which is about sort of expanding and sort of doing some of millennials and thinking about the future. And so it was really about a piece that was sort of like dynamic and moving, very futuristic in its whole sort of vibe. Um, so like I said, we make a lot of prototypes. So this is the first sketch. This is the first prototype. So you can see that it was very scrappy, where it's like we literally made this from the sketch, but it wasn't quite there. So then I literally start to add like okay, the fillers of okay, how this needs to kind of move this way, move that way. Rhythm is really important to me in my work and in life, really. To be honest, I think I'm someone who tries to be. I like to say I like to dance on rhythm philosophically. You know what I mean? Like I want to feel like I'm in every season in life, I'm dancing like rhythm and flowing with things that are not, either too ahead or too behind. I'm just kind of grooving and sync with the music. And in my collections too, I hope that your eyes wander in a way that feels like it's got a nice groove to it. I like to do things that I feel have a sense of visual harmony, a sense of ease to it, as opposed to maybe too many distractions. But in my perspective, so I'm not style or trend focused or motivated. I just kind of like to. I tend to gravitate towards things that hopefully, like I said, bring a sense of convey a sense of freedom and harmony and sharing something, whether it's culture, like a handmade technique or so forth. So it really takes a village. It really takes a village. This is the team that I worked with on this particular piece. Um, I'm always sort of eager to meet more women in the metal crafts, not many. I actually took metal welding classes in New York, but then I didn't have anywhere to practice. But it's something that I personally am interested in, and I think it's a great field just working in metal. So I actually painted this piece myself. So that was really cool because it was something I was doing during the beginning of the pandemic in isolation, so painting it by myself. So it kind of became kind of therapeutic in a way, you know? Yeah. And so this is a talented metal artist who I worked with. And then this is the final piece. We just did a photo shoot and the pictures are coming. So this is probably not the greatest picture, but it shows you sort of like the final thing. So like I said, I do a lot of sketches, a lot of pieces go through like that initial sort of conceptualization stage where I'm sort of exploring which way to go. This is for a specific client where in this particular piece, I was inspired by just out there, the concept of outdoor living rooms, outdoor spaces, and ocean vibes, and wanting to have the furniture echo that sort of easy breezy, you know, ocean movement, and the ripples in the ocean really was that was just the inspiration. So that is what sort of created this sort of ripples, as you see. And then I wanted something that felt really organic and part of nature, like a leaf, like you're just kind of chilling under a leaf, and that created the umbrella. So a lot of times when you start, the sketch is like really sort of trying to evoke a certain mood, and it's very much whatever energy you're trying to sort of portray. I really wanted sort of this calm energy and this sort of very peaceful and serene energy. And then when you get into it, then it sort of starts to adjust, right? So there are less sparks here because it didn't make as much sense production-wise, and also just doing practicality. So you start to, it's a very iterative process. So I always start very conceptual to push myself to not do what I'm already familiar with. So I'm very happy in my design conceptualization process to be wrong, I'm very happy to be uncomfortable. I'm very okay to be anxious and it not make sense right away. That's a huge part of it for me. And then letting it evolve and letting it then sort of like grow into its own like a child in some ways, you know. And so you can see that the piece obviously evolved, but it still maintains, I think, um, that the concept of something that feels, you know, airy and light and calm. And then so we started trying to explore different materials for this, frame and work with the other artisans. So Rashid over here weaving it in different material. Um, and then also we had some other, you know, furniture pieces that we started to explore. Um, that had that same vibe. With the chair, it was easier to, not easier, it was more practical to explore, more arcs and more different. There was more flexibility that you could explore in some ways. This is a piece called the Bata stool. Bata means shoes in Yoruba. So I'm Yoruba. And it was really, when you look at the stool, the legs of the stool, that's really what creates the identity of the stool. And so for me, the idea of, the legs and this is really the idea of like a journey. And that's kind of how the name shoes comes into play. And also it was, even in the making process, I work with shoemakers, and it was also fitting like a shoe in many ways, just like the lacing and how we kind of wove it together. So sometimes the names come from different things, with the actual outdoor furniture piece that I'm showing you. I also work sometimes in sort of like open collaborative spaces. And so this particular piece, because of its size, we have to work in a very sort of open collaborative space. And so we have people from different parts of the community and even children walking by. And before it took shape and looked like an actual, relaxing chair, a lot of people would just come and just ask questions. What is it? What is it? What is it? And what it is, what is like kini? What is like kilele? And so the name is called Kini What? Because through the whole process, that was like, we had made other stuff in that particular era, but this was like the piece that a lot of people would just, kids would be coming home from school and just come and stand and just start talking to me and would engage in different conversations. So the process of it became such a big part of it that at the end of it, I just felt so like I took something from that experience, and that inspired the name for this particular piece. This was an event where I did some interior work on, and this is to show an example of, again, tradition and trying to bring it to the contemporary interiors. So this is basically like a traditional mortar that is used to pound, like I said, fufu and different solid foods. And in this particular case, I literally, repurposed it, turned it upside down, and then put like this woven mats on it, and created like little side tables for an event, and had some sort of bamboo, benches. So so sometimes it's like trying to find little ways to, like I said, bring in different worlds and different things. So now, Talking Stools collection. Sometimes the inspiration comes from, like I said, childhood memories. Sometimes it comes from, events, and sometimes it comes from, materiality, and sometimes it also comes from different things that I want to support, right? And in this particular case, I was very much inspired by a women's collective that weaves mats, and they've been weaving this mats for decades, and back in the days, this was something that the communities would support and, actually buy. And, but now it's considered traditional, old school, so not a lot of people are buying them. And so I basically wanted to figure out how to extend the use of this product, how to extend um, into a different product category, right? So initially I started working, so this is the mats. I started working with I started trying to work with different furniture makers, but it was hard to find furniture makers that were, I guess, open-minded enough to want to sort of test it out. So I started making it myself with my hands. I'm someone that's very hands-on. Like I said, that's part of, what drew me into like crafts, And so as I started making it myself, I realized that it was looking like a shoe. And that was actually how I started working with shoemakers, because you almost have to sculpt the mats in order to create this, the poofs and the ottomans that I was trying to create. And so I started reaching out to, folks who make shoes. And the first guy I reached out to said, well, I've never made furniture, but let's see. And I said, you know what, that's great. In the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, a lot of the furniture makers had said, no, it's not, this is not for furniture. So I was like, you know what, this is a great starting point. Let's see, is a fantastic starting point. We're gonna start there. And so we spent like literally, just, many days just testing it out and trying to make it into life. And it was quite an interesting process, prototyping for a few weeks, months. There's some pictures of sort of earlier stages of us prototyping it. Me working with him, I work closely with other artists, especially in the initial stages. So we get to know her quite well. And then it's the final thing where we actually created this modern contemporary pieces. And then, as time went on, we kind of tested it out in different colors. And like I said, I try to create pieces that are versatile, so it works well in sort of a more minimal setting, like a minimal table here, and also be a bit more edgy here. So it's really about trying to create pieces that, hopefully people sort of see as timeless and so forth. So I want to talk a little bit briefly about how I use design as a mediation tool in terms of working with brands as a design consultant. I got the opportunity to work with with YouTube, and in collaboration with a New York-based production company, Good Sense New York. And it was really cool because it was YouTube's their second Black YouTube Fan Fest in DC. And so I did concept design for the stage and for like the marketing and so forth. So I thought I'd share this because I know some of the students are into interiors and spaces as well. So essentially for me, it was about connecting culture, creativity, and celebration. And this was during the height of Black Panther. So it's a couple of years ago, during the height of Black Panther. So that was a big inspiration point. But also different things like the African American Museum by the Adeoye Pavilion by Vasquez, and then also like this historical monumental reunification sculpture in Cameroon. And so all of these different things started the basically inspiration mood board, and then me sort of like taking different words I wanted to highlight, and then taking a step back and creating conceptual sketches to really focus on a few key things, like this clarification visual from specific tribes that do that sort of blending with the environment. It was the hats, whether it was this sort of reunification monument. There was a certain energy that I wanted to portray, and it was sort of this energy of something that was sort of moving rapidly upwards and higher. And it was driven mostly by this, but other things. And so it became a very sort of abstract drawing that basically then morphed into the actual stage design, and it basically sort of framed the stage design. And so this is a picture of how that sort of stage design ended up looking, and this is a picture of it. So that's pretty much it on my end. Just to kind of show you how I sort of try to use design in a way that basically brings different things together, and hopefully this is interesting to people who have different interests. I think a lot of times we might feel like we need to pick one or the other, but I think we shouldn't be afraid to see if we can find synergies between different things, and not being afraid to be wrong,
Mhm.
and just kind of like being in tune with yourself, um, and just going for it, basically. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lani. And I did have a question for you.
Yes, go
This is
ahead.
for our design students. I noticed throughout your presentation and just also following Studio Lani that you have a very clear connected vision with your work. So, I feel like it's very easy to identify your work because the vision is clear and you have a unified theme, even if it's not the same type. Maybe it's a light installation, maybe it's a piece of furniture, but I can
Mhm.
still see your creative vision in that. And I wonder if you could share any advice for young designers on how to create their own unique creative vision, or how to stay true to that. When they might be getting, voices from clients that say they want to go in a certain way. How do you stay true to your vision with your company?
Okay, it's a great question. Um, I would say that, so the question is, how do you stay true to your vision, or how do you find it? Which one is it? Is it both?
I guess both. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I guess I think I would say, um, spend a lot of time discovering yourself and being sort of, and it's okay if it evolves. It's okay if it evolves. Nothing's static. It's okay if you invent yourself. Um, I would say the blocking out the noise, the visual noise. I think more than ever we are bombarded with um, information, inspiration, and it's great, but it's also pollution. you know, it's like it's polluting us mentally sometimes. And for me, when I first started, I felt quite confused because I felt a lot of things that I was gravitating towards. I was like, I don't think this is what people think is cool right now. Like it just sits like a big, but I had to kind of like rest in that uncomfortable stage and still keep going in that uncomfortable stage. And even when it wasn't making sense, and then little by little, it started to, even I started to feel a little bit more comfortable. And then it started to, feel a little bit more comfortable. And then other people started to feel a little bit more comfortable. So it's a process, it's so cliche to say it's a process, but it really is a process. It's about, like they say, just being okay with being uncomfortable, and realizing that it is a process, but staying true to it, pushing through. So that's the how do you figure out what your thing is or your aesthetics, whatever. And then the how do you stay true to it? Um, I think that it's about balance, right? I think that there are, times when, especially when you work in collaboration with clients and so forth, some clients would actually want you to do more of your style, even when sometimes you want to do something that shows your breadth of experience, or or you want to push yourself in a certain way, and they're like, no, no, that's like into you to just do it again. I'm like the same, like you don't want something different, and then you have some other clients who are like a bit more, you know, focused on what they want. So I think it's about balance in terms of having an open conversation with the client. When the client trusts you, um, and and I think sometimes it's about taking the risk. I spend sometimes, and especially early on, you have to spend a lot of time doing, I don't want to say free work, but like, pitching stuff. You kind of have to build trust. Do you get what I'm saying? And then when you do that, then people are like, oh, okay, Um, so I would say balance is the key word, especially in the initial stages. But also realizing sometimes you do have to prove yourself. And that means a little bit extra time, and as long as you're willing to do that, it pays off. It pays off, right? But obviously don't do anything that I think is obviously not aligned with your values, not aligned with what you're how you want to add value, right? So something that just doesn't seem sustainable, don't lower your quality or whatever. Stay true to yourself, be authentic to yourself. But so the reason why I say balance is because sometimes it may seem like, oh, this is not quote unquote aligned with my aesthetics, but maybe it might not seem like that on the surface, but maybe it's about expressing your aesthetics in a different way, which is not a bad thing. Sometimes that actually ends up being a beautiful challenge because it really sort of allows you to approach things from a different dimension. And it took that client saying, no, I just don't want anything hanging from the ceiling. You're like, oh, okay. Then why did you call me for lighting? And they're like, well, just put something on the wall. And you're like, okay. And so I think you have to be open-minded. You have to be willing to challenge yourself, and growth is important. And it cannot always, we live in a world where I think we have to be conscious about the dialogue, internal and external dialogue, right? So sometimes you get to say, I want to challenge myself today. And then you can do that. And then sometimes the world or the client says, I'm going to give you a challenge. And then it seems like, oh, this is difficult. I want to choose when I want to be challenged. But it doesn't always work like that. So when I keep saying balance, I mean it in all ways. Be open to you challenging yourself when you want to, but be open to being challenged when you don't want to. And actually, sometimes I feel it's even better. It'll surprise you.